Congressman John Garamendi joining us. He is chair of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Readiness. Thanks for taking time to speak with us about the situation in Ukraine.
Delighted to be with you, and it is a serious situation.
Well, the White House and the Pentagon did announce today about 3,000 U.S. troops going to be deployed to Eastern Europe. Exactly where are they going? What is their mission?
Well, the mission is to further deter Russia from invading Ukraine. They are not going to Ukraine. They're going to Poland and Romania principally. Most of those, about half of those troops are already in Europe. They're permanently stationed in Germany. The other half will be deploying from North Carolina, the 82nd Airborne, and they'll be deploying to Eastern Europe, not close to the Russian border, but in the Eastern European countries of Poland and Romania. A further message to Putin: don't mess around. Don't do this. The other really important thing that's going on here in Congress is the development of a very serious sanction legislation that would go right to the heart of the Russian economy and right to the pocketbook of Putin and his cronies, the folks that are in charge of the Russian Federation. That piece of legislation, we expect the Senate to move it sometime this week, and hopefully the House, giving further support to Biden on the diplomatic side of this.
On the troop situation, how do you feel about the message this is sending to our NATO allies? And you mentioned a message to Russian President Putin. Is he going to take it seriously?
He should. He should take it very, very seriously. It's not just the American troops. France and two other NATO countries are also increasing their presence. France is specifically sending additional troops to Romania. The other countries are bolstering the effort in Estonia, and Lithuania, and Latvia. All of those are frontline countries bordering the Russian Federation. So this is purely, and I want to make this very clear, this is defensive. There is no offense here. This is purely defensive. We do know that over the years, there have been serious threats, particularly to the Baltic states, from Russia, that they could very easily overtake those countries should they decide to do so. The presence of these troops there tells them that, no, NATO's going to stand with those NATO countries. Don't mess around. And also it puts Putin, I think, back into reconsidering whether he really wants to invade Romania. Really wants to invade Ukraine. If he were to do so, then these troops, while not entering Ukraine, would be able to have some of the armaments, some of the equipment readily available to shift over to Ukraine if that was necessary or desirable. In addition to that, we're continuing to send into Ukraine serious armaments, defensive principally, anti-armament missiles, javelins, and other kinds of defensive mechanisms and materials that the Ukrainians will need should Russia decide that they would want to invade. The really important thing here is to make sure Russia doesn't invade, that they know that Russia and Putin know that there's going to be an extremely heavy price to pay should they decide to further invade Ukraine. Now, keep in mind, they've already done this.
Right. And so to your point, is the feeling still that the invasion is imminent by Russia?
Well, certainly Russia is in a position to do that. Imminent is a word that stretches from this moment until some future time. But we know that Russia has the capability soon, and that could be in the next week or the next days, to invade should they decide to do so. The real issue here is if they do invade and attempt to take over more, or even to invade and provide additional troops in the eastern Donbas region of Ukraine, we would consider that to be an invasion, and the sanctions that are presently available to the president and those that we should immediately add through legislation here in Congress would go into effect. And those sanctions will cripple the Russian economy. Russia is dependent upon the export of gas and oil. We can shut that off. and we do have the capability, we meaning like-minded countries around the world that do have the ability to export natural gas, we can immediately backfill the loss of Russian gas with LNG tankers, which could be mobilized from very, very many different countries around the world to supply and to backfill the lost gas that would be necessary to support the European countries in the wintertime.
Now, what can you possibly tell us about this published document suggesting the U.S. could be willing to enter an agreement with Russia over missile deployments in Europe if Moscow backs away from the border there with Ukraine?
A good idea. A very, very good idea. In fact, until very recently, 3 years ago now, in the Trump administration, there was an agreement with Russia on the deployment of these not intercontinental, but limited missile deployments by the United States as well as Russia. That could be restarted. In fact, it should be restarted to the benefit of both Europe as well as Western Europe, as well as Russia. So that's a real possibility. Now, we must also recognize that the reason that fell apart was twofold. Russia had deployed these intermediate range missiles along the eastern NATO countries' borders. We then deployed some of our own, or threatened to do so, with a submarine launched missile. And that terminated the agreement, the treaty between the United States and Russia. The effort to put that back together again, good for everybody.
Congressman Garamendi, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.